Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. Welcome again to the Into Agronomy Podcast. Joined today with my counterpart, Derek Cottrill and Rodney Phelps. So great to have you. Guys, just a quick update maybe from the geographies. I'm probably the only one with planting progress. You guys are past that, but any updates you want to give, Derek?
Yeah. So I guess overall my territory, corn is pushing V5. I saw my first V6 cornfield yesterday. I'm sure we'll talk plenty about this over the podcast here, but with the cooler weather conditions, things are moving slow. And so corn's, like I said, about that V5 hitting a critical timing. But then soybeans are anywhere from V2 to V3. Saw my first V4 corn or V4 soybean, but that would be the furthest along. And nothing's really moved stage-wise dramatically here over the last week. But overall, everything looks good, and for the most part, planting is complete at this point. So,
Rodney?
Yeah, so planning's complete. Corn is in, a lot of it is from anywhere from V4 to V6. And soybeans are same as Derek. We did encounter some replant after some heavy water and some crusting, but for the most part, bean crop is looking good, and corn crop also.
Me on the other hand, we're still planting. We're finishing up, but probably 95% planted on corn and probably pushing 80% on soybeans. But yeah, we've got two distinct planting dates. We've got April planting, and then we've got this May planting that's gone from middle of May on till now. Corn, the earliest V7, there may be some V8 in the river bottom, but that'll move fairly quickly with the 80s coming. And then soybeans, yeah, we got beans from just planted to just emerging to probably my earliest or V2, maybe V3, but not quite as far along as you guys. With that said, some of the things we wanted to cover today, just kind of a general growth and development again, and Derek kind of alluded to some of that. On soybeans, we'll have him go more in depth on that. Rodney and I will talk a little bit more on corn development. Then we'll go into some of the weather conditions that are impacting things, kind of past, present, future. We'll talk a little bit. I'm going to have Derek talk about adjuvants, some of the things we've seen there. And going forward, we'll give a little bit of a tar spot outlook. That's a hot topic people want to talk about. And then if we have time, we'll cover a little bit of the new disease that we saw in Missouri last year, corn stunt. So Derek, if you want to kick us off, like where we're at in terms of soybean crop development right now and what's happening with soybean crop.
Yeah, so as I mentioned yesterday, out scouting fields, saw my first V4 soybeans, and not to say there isn't more than just that field I looked at out there, but I would say by far the majority of our soybeans are at that V2 to V3. And at this stage right now, I mean, a few of the key things that are happening, and I think I actually mentioned this on the last podcast, which just shows you how slow our development has been over the last week or so. But at V2, that's when that nodulation starts kicking in and supplying nitrogen and to that soybean plant. Now, I'll also say too, because I'm getting questions about this, those cotyledons that are there, they're only needed for about 7 to 10 days after emergence to supply some energy. Once we got trifoliates here, like even our first one, but V2, V3, that plant's actively photosynthesizing and it's getting its energy from that. So if you're losing cotyledons or if there's some symptomology on them type deal, whether it be from a PPO, things like that, those aren't important anymore. But main thing right now is make sure that growing point looks good and making sure we stay weed free. Because right now we're soybeans, it's not determining a whole lot of yield at this point until we start hitting flowering here in a few weeks. But keeping them weed free right now would be the key in soybeans. That post pass needs to happen timely, and making sure we have everything in line there, because our water hemp is coming fast and some of our pre's have been on now for 5-6 weeks. And depending on rainfall, things like that, that's probably about as much as you'd want to expect. But don't miss your opportunity to layer in a residual here over the next 7 to 10 days or so. But
Good points, Derek. On the corn side of things, I mean, I'll say ditto to what you just said. A lot of what we're discussing now, V7-ish corn, if we're in that frame, is very similar to what we were talking about last time. So I won't belabor it. I'll just say at this stage, V6, V7, we're determining row number around on that ear this early in the game. Plant's also switching over to its nodal root system, its permanent root system. And so the weather can have some impact on that. Rodney will talk a little bit about that. And then at V7, we're also initiating that tassel too. So a lot of things going on at a very early stage that most people don't realize within this corn right now that will determine yield later on. So Rodney, I don't know if you want to mention a little bit about this cooler weather, just some of the impacts it's had on this corn on growth and development.
Yeah, so some of this corn has went through what we call the ugly duckling stage. It's been cool. And some of it may have had a herbicide pass on it, so it's metabolizing herbicide. But the other thing to be cognizant of is when we have cool temperatures like this, we tend to stack the nodes. And so I was in some corn yesterday that was at the same V stage, V5, but one of them was 14 inches tall and one of them was 8 inches tall. So we want to be cognizant of we can't go by the crop height. We need to actually look at the collar development so that we know what stage our crop is, not only for determining where we're going in the future, but herbicide passes were not off label on some of our herbicide passes and weeds. But another watch out is forecasted here in the 90s this weekend and sunshine. This corn's going to explode and it's going to elongate quicker than normal. And so then we may get brittle. So it seems like, guys, we never have a perfect world. There's always something. So need to be cognizant of those things. And once a corn crop gets good heat and good sunshine, things change drastically. In 24-hour period, the crop will change. So if you've got some ugly duckling or some thing, boy, what's wrong with that corn? Go back tomorrow or the next day after you've had heat and sunshine, and it'll be a whole different story.
yeah.
Yeah, Rodney, I think one thing just about that, I think about all the rapid growth syndrome questions I've gotten this year more than my entire career, but that corn's just been sitting there not doing anything for the last week in the cool temperatures. So, yeah, to your point, normally it moves a lot faster and it's going to now. Now we get to 90. Speaking of weather conditions, Derek, lots of questions, pictures, concerns about some of this corn, some of these soybeans that we lit up with herbicides earlier on there a couple weeks ago. And some people a little timid about what do I do now if I'm going to start spraying post passes on beans or on some of this later planted corn. I guess just if you want to go through a little bit from the adjuvant realm of things, like what do I do? What should I do? What shouldn't I do? All those pieces.
Yeah, well, and in terms of what you should and shouldn't do, I mean, unfortunately, when it comes to adjuvants and things like that, it's really tough to have a one size fits all type deal. Adjuvants are certainly extremely important into our herbicide tank mixes. I mean, if there was one standard, our burn down chemistries, we need a water conditioner in there for those, not just for the glyphosate, but for most of our burn down chemistries. But you're exactly right. We've already alluded to the weather conditions, and right now with our cooler conditions, and we finally got some moisture here, what we have is thin leaf cuticles and things like that, and crops growing slow. I think one thing people need to remember is that crops have to metabolize that herbicide just like, not necessarily like a weed would, but it still has to metabolize it even if it doesn't kill it. And so been getting a lot of crop response calls there. And I think one of our bigger concerns happens with adjuvants is, do I have too much oil? Is it going to be too hot? Things like that. Problem is that just all depends on your tank mix. I guess first of all, I would, understand what you're already putting into the tank. I think when we think of oils, we think of adjuvants, and that's when we're adding it. But we're actually adding, in some cases, oils or emulsifiers to our tank mixes with our herbicides that we have in there. So you take something like Enlist or some of our Group 15s, things like that, they will actually carry in some oil And if I have a tank mix with that, that might be a little bit more aggressive, and I'm cool right now with lush conditions and those cuticles haven't hardened off, I might back off that oil recommendation that I had. Now, I'm cautious saying that because, Nick's heard me say this, most of my reps have. I always believe that good weed control is right on the edge of crop response. And in a lot of cases, we're trying to take either a broadleaf out of a broadleaf or grass out of a grass. We have to find that balance between good weed control, getting aggressive enough that we're going to kill things like water hemp and lamb's quarter, but still reaching a acceptable level of crop response. Not condoning crop response, but we do have to get aggressive, because what will be more impactful than the crop response is that weeds that are in your field later on in the season, which that leads me to another point too. I'd rather get more aggressive with my adjuvant, whether that be an oil, things like that, early on in the season with soybeans and stuff before they really start determining yield once we get to flowering, then later on in the season chasing weeds, right? And so it really is a judgment call. It's not a black and white on, hey, run this oil with this tank mix at this rate type deal. It's going to be case by case. When it comes down to it, talk to your agronomist, talk to your adjuvant supplier. But I will note too, hot weather doesn't necessarily mean crop response. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions I get is, well, it's 90 degrees out, I can't run any oils, anything like that. Well, think about it. Why does lamb's quarter and water hemp get so hard to control when it gets hot and dry? Because they thicken off and harden off. Our crops do the same thing. And so if we're going out there whenever it gets hot and dry and we're spraying nothing but surfactant with a chemistry that needs an oil, we're probably not going to kill the weeds. We probably won't ding up the crop, but we're not going to kill the weeds either. And so what did we really accomplish at all, right? So understand what is in the tank. It's going to be probably a case by case scenario, but reach out and discuss that if you're confused on that. But in any case, corn or beans, nothing good happens after R1 and soybeans in terms of herbicide apps, and in general, nothing good happens after V8 and corn in terms of herbicide apps and adjuvants and things like that. Be proactive regardless with what you're using, and we're going to be better off. But yeah, sometimes we need to adjust our adjuvant rates and things like that. But again, it depends on what we already have in there and what you're trying to go after, right? So not a direct answer, Nick, but it does depend case by case. So
Yeah, no, I think those are good points, and I would agree with you 100%. I'll take a little bit of crop injury early on to kill the weeds than letting the weeds go, and I know they'll cost me yield later.
Well, and we say crop injury. I'll add there too that we say injury, but it's not yielding back. Most of it can be cosmetic, and it doesn't always correlate to yield. But that goes back to making sure we're doing it timely type thing when the plant's less sensitive to it. So
one last question for you, Derek. So what do you think? I don't know if you're in the same boat, but at least in the geography I'm in, just went through a really cool period. We've had a little bit of rainy weather, misty weather here. If I'm going out and I'm spraying today when it's supposed to be almost 90 and sunny after it was just, let's say, 60 degrees the last 3 days, what should I expect there?
Yep. And so I mentioned a minute ago that heat doesn't always mean crop response does harden off. That hardening off process does take several days. And I can't tell you exactly, but generally we'll say 3 to 4 days of hot weather and stuff will start to harden off. Right now, since we're in that transition period, especially in my territory, we are going from 60-degree temperatures and we'll be almost 90 by Sunday. There'll be this transition period here over the next 4 or 5 days where we're going to get really hot and those leaves haven't had a chance to harden off. Our crop hasn't. And therefore, crops I could see once we get really hot here over the next few days and we're going out with applications, they could be sensitive and going to be more sensitive to some burn and crop response type scenarios. So again, over here over the next 4 or 5 days might be a scenario as we get hot where you want to back that off. Here, 10 days of really hot weather, we might want to stick with our normal recommendation and get aggressive again because that crop's gonna be hard enough at that point. But great point, Nick, because I do think our crop's going to be sensitive here over the next 4 or 5 days when we first get hot before those crops have a chance to harden off. Yeah.
Those are all good points, Derek. Speaking of the weather and the cooler weather we had, I mean, that's a perfect lead in to talking about another subject which involves cool weather a little bit, and that would be tar spot and corn. That's been a hot topic in Missouri the last couple of years. I'd say it's been a really hot topic this winter just because it was so detrimental to at least us in this state. last year, especially within the geography that I cover. And so it's top of mind. One thing I will point out, it was first confirmed last year in Missouri in mid-June. I think, Derek, you made the comment about it being first found in northeast Kansas, right across the river from you, last year in early June. That was the first week of June. In 2023, we had some confirmation in Missouri in June as well, kind of that mid-June timeframe. So just pointing out that we're kind of getting close to that period where we've seen it in Missouri the last couple of years. Now, generally, it's been the initial infection, and then it's kind of halted or stopped, and then it rears its head again later. But it is favored by cooler conditions. It's favored by lots of moisture, precipitation. It really likes those extended periods where we have highs, or average, I shouldn't say highs, where we have average temperatures between mid 60s, mid 70s. And last year was a perfect scenario for it, especially in July in Missouri. We were kind of unseasonably cool, which really flared that stuff. I was just looking up last night, what's the average air temperature been in Columbia over the course of May so far? 62 degrees. So we're about 4 degrees cooler than normal. That's a pretty good start for it. One thing they've kind of found the last couple of years with tar spot is that air temperature, the cooler temperatures are more important for that initial infection. Now, the moisture comes into play when we want subsequent infections and we want it to really rear up. That will really help. So, that extended leaf wetness, I think they talk a lot about 7+ hours of leaf wetness. So, lots of precip or lots of heavy dews will keep it going. And so I just really wanted to bring it up because I want people to be aware. I'm not crying wolf right now, but just making everyone aware that so far conditions have been good, and we need to be cognizant or understand that things so far have set up well for it. And the effect, and Rodney, I guess I'll bounce it to you here, but just the fact that we had it last year, the inoculum's here, so it can get a faster start than it has maybe in previous years for us. But you've got way more experience than we do here.
Yeah, so I've been dealing with it the past 4 to 5 years. And so your comment is spot on. You guys have had tar spots, so the inoculum is there, and it's there every year now. Remember, the pathogen has to have the disease triangle. Well, you've already hit on everything, the temp, the moisture, and the pathogen. So it's there. The other thing, and you hit on the dewy mornings. What I'll call out that it's caught us flat-footed up here in the past is, well, it hasn't been raining, but how about those mornings when you get into June and July and you come out of the house in the morning and the humidity hits you like a ton of bricks, and the grass is wet. You mean you're just soaking wet. That's enough moisture to bring tar spot on. The other thing is tar spot misery loves company. So if you're starting to see gray leaf spot, you're starting to see some of your other leaf diseases in the corn crop, you're probably tar spot is probably going to rear its ugly head. And so we've been dealing with it. So I'll be cognizant. Everybody needs to stick with their plan. And Derek said it early on some things. If you've got a plan of fungicide in your plan moving forward, don't veer away from that. And a tassel application of fungicide is by far the best. But if you're really concerned and you have an area that you had high tar spot, if you haven't post chemistry to your corn yet, throwing a fungicide in with the post chemistry helps start to give that plant the ability to kind of help fight off tar spot. The other thing is genetics are a big player. Some genetics are better against tar spot than others, but I caution they're all susceptible. And there's nothing on the market today that is resistant to tar spot. So it's an animal that needs tamed. Now, if it comes in as early as you guys are talking in June, you've got to be aggressively managed on it because it will hurt yield. Up here, last year, it didn't come in till probably late August, early September. Crop was made. It was all cosmetic, but it is something to be cognizant of because the inoculum is there, and we have found even following soybeans that the year prior they had tar spot and then they follow with soybeans, the inoculum's still there. So just something, don't want to cry wolf, but you guys are set up for the disease triangle that tar spot is there.
Well, I appreciate those comments, Rodney. Derek, you've had quite a bit of experience up there in Northwest Missouri the last couple of years too. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, I get not much more because those are all great points. I guess just like Rodney and Nick said, the inoculum's here. We know that. I don't think we should be treating it like it's anything new, but I also don't think we should panic, and we also shouldn't act like it's here. Just have a plan for it. But my thing is, even before tar spot was a thing in 2015, we still, our other diseases, Rodney mentioned gray leaf spot, whether it's northern corn leaf blight, rust, whatever it may be, that being proactive and having a plan for fungicides, that's important for those. But guess what? That's number one key with tar spot too. Just have a good plan for it and know your key timings for fungicide applications. It's like I always tell guys, fungicides were extremely effective before tar spot was ever a thing. And so let's not act like we're only using fungicides for tar spot, I guess is my point as well. And we had a plan then. And so keep that plan now, stick with it. And if we need to adjust, depending on the weather and what the reports are saying, then we can. But definitely, if you don't have a plan in place, that's going to be strike one with tar spot. But stick with the plan and we'll see what happens here. And we'll keep reporting on what we're seeing. So
Remember
Appreciate
too,
that.
guys, that once you see tar spot, you can treat, but you're not going to cure what's already there. So it's a treat before you see type situation. So you have to have a plan to get that fungicide on there because we can't take the black spots away once they're there.
Well, appreciate that, guys. Yeah, I would agree 100% on that. Once it gets a foothold, it can really take off. And Rodney mentioned it. Yeah, just underscore a huge hybrid difference between how hybrids handle it. And so you need to be aware, cognizant of that. I tell people a lot. I have the last couple of days asking questions. I thought Southern rust caused some massive yield losses in corn between fungicide and not. And then tar spot in 2024 proved me wrong that it can do even more damage than than Southern rust. So yeah, it's pretty debilitating. You just, to your guys' point, don't need to be super scared. But as Derek said, just have a plan, stick to the plan. With that said, I guess one other thing I wanted to cover quick, and it's probably more on my mind than your guys's, just because I saw it last year and now we're going into later planning. But new disease last year for us in Missouri was corn stunt. It's something that's been in the southern U.S., but it's never really made it much past that. And then last year it made a wave up through into Missouri, Oklahoma, made it as far north as Wisconsin last year. But it's a disease that's vectored by corn leafhopper. Leafhoppers don't overwinter this far north. They have to overwinter in Central America. They have to make their way up. Whether or not they're here yet, when they'll be here, I have no idea. But it is a vector for this corn stunt disease, which just can be caused by two bacterial strains and a viral strain. So it's not something we can control with a fungicide. It vectors that disease early on. There's a lot that says it's before V8 or V8 and before. It could happen anywhere from VE to V8, where it vectors that and causes significant yield loss. What it does to the plant, it can cause some reddening. What I saw were kind of those scorched red leaves that you sometimes see, especially if a deer or something goes through and munches the ear off, and you see that buildup of anthocyanin, which causes that purpling color. It's somewhat like that, but you get to peeling the ear back. And what I noticed a lot of was just kind of a ghosted ear. The ear was there, had the right amount of kernels, but they all just shriveled up. It looked like a sweet corn ear that went to harvest. So really small shriveled kernels. It can also cause missing kernels to look a little bit more like poor pollination. But there's absolutely, once you see it, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I never saw it on a major level last year. Probably some of the later planted fields, maybe 5% of the plants at the most. So it was a pretty low level. But in southern parts of Missouri, they had some fields really, really rocked by it. And if you go into South America, it is not an every year problem. They say maybe an every 3 to 4 year problem for them, but they can see massive yield losses up to like 70%. And so they do a lot to treat the corn leaf hoppers. I just bring all this up because we're planning later than normal for us. And so we could potentially see it. Now, whether or not that means we need to be really aggressive managing the corn leaf hoppers right now, I don't know. I don't know that anyone knows. There's a lot of research that's going on and a lot of surveying to figure out where the leaf hoppers are at when they're coming in. But just something to be cognizant of, because once we see it later on, there's not a thing we can do. There's no curative treatment. There's nothing left we can do about it. So just one of those strange diseases to mention, but we saw it last year. We're likely to see it again this year with us planting here in later May even.
Hey, Nick, does hoppers in alfalfa any indication that you may have hoppers in the corn?
It'd be a different that would be more like potato leaf hopper. This would be corn leaf hopper. And so corn leaf hopper has to make its way all the way up from Central America. So the potato leaf hopper would be a different deal. Yeah, good
So they
question.
would have to come up with the trade winds from the south.
That's correct. Yep. They get carried on winds. Yep. That's a great point. Well, guys, do you have anything else to add? Derek, Rodney?
No, that's all great. We didn't see the corn stunt stuff, but maybe that's because we weren't looking for it either. So definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Well, appreciate you guys listening. Next time we'll cover more in depth on corn fungicides. Just want to kind of get that conversation started with tar spot, but we'll spend more in depth on that here in 2 weeks. But I appreciate everyone listening to us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.